All right, we're going to talk about understanding the components of the United States military and eligibility. I feel much more comfortable having just done all of that. Now I've broken the ice. So, this is super important stuff. I failed to mention, there's been a lot of deep topics. Obviously, what we're going to talk about here is a little more technical. Don't let that stop you from being emotionally moved, and if you feel like at the end you need to do a standing ovation regarding this stuff, I get it, okay? Okay, that was my last joke. All right, so thank you. I'll be here all week. All right, so we're going to talk about the components, what it takes to earn the benefit, how we actually go about obtaining the right documentation so that we don't set veterans up to fail, because we see it day in and day out. We have a super huge variety of experience levels in this crew. So I hope for most of you this is the 50th time you've heard this and you knew it 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. But be patient because we're all learning at different speeds here. So just for people's general understanding of the military, for those who didn't go through that personally, we'll start with the military obligation. So every military obligation is 8 years in time. So you're going to talk to people that are like, I did 3 years in active duty Army. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. I was in the National Guard for 6 years. Technically, they all had 8-year contracts. They had their time that they were activated or on orders where they're actually drilling or they're full-time active duty. That's their actual day job, right? And then after they get out and they get discharged from active duty or they get separated from the National Guard, they get put onto what's called IRR, the Inactive Ready Reserve. So every military obligation is an 8-year commitment, okay? There are 4 components of the military. There is active duty, there is the reserve, which the VA classifies as federal. It is federal. VA classifies as select reserves. And then there's state components. So we're talking about National Guard, Army and Air National Guard. The VA labels this as National Guard. And then there's the inactive ready reserve. Those are the 4 components, right? They all have different purposes. Active duty, obviously, we know what they do, right? That's their full-time. Those are the fighting forces that you're going to see wearing a uniform most of the time. The state components and the reserve components are the ones that get, the weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, maybe randomly a school for 3 months to just conveniently get pulled out of their normal life and go off to a school. But then when, come wartime, and the active duty components are taxed because of the op tempo of the missions, they call in the National Guard and the reserve components, okay? And then the inactive ready reserve is, they're already out, but they're still technically obligated to the government. So Uncle Sam can and will, if the op tempo requires it, call those people back. So when I was in Iraq on my first deployment, there was a group in processing when we were going home. They were from Hawaii. These big Samoan fellas, they were all inactive ready reserve guys that had been out and then got called back. And while they were out, I don't know if you guys know this, but I can tell you what happens when you get out. You put on weight, and those boys...
You get so big you can't fit into your uniform again, so they can't call you back.
Yeah. Well, they had like that, like when you fly and they give you that extender for your seat, like that's what they had on their uniforms. They
Button extenders, all that stuff.
So that does happen, that those guys can get called back. And just, there it is visually, active duty. You have the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the Coast Guard, and recently, Space Force, which is awesome.
Still have a really hard time with that.
Check out the documentary on Netflix with Steve Carell. It's really enlightening. Space Force is cool. I have regrets about my choices. Then there's the reserves. So the reserves has the Army Reserve, obviously. There's the Air Force Reserve. The United States Marine Corps has reserves. There's a Navy Reserve, and the Coast Guard has reserves as well. No Space Force reserves at this time.
That we know of.
That we know of. And then there's the National Guard components that are state, right? So they have slightly different functions. The federal components versus the state reserve components. State components can be obviously deployed within the continental United States for things like riot control, disaster relief, COVID, People were activated all over for COVID. So you won't see the reserves called up stateside. You will see them called up to go around the world. But if you have an emergency in the homeland, that's where National Guard is going to come into play. Okay?
Can I add?
I would love to have you add things.
All right, so there's a couple components here with the National Guard. Anytime you talk to a veteran and you say, hey, what branch did you serve? I served in the Army. I served every other weekend. Well, is it National Guard or is it Army, right? Because it's Army National Guard and Air National Guard. So you have to clarify that because it's a big difference when we get a little bit further in this presentation, okay?
Good distinction. I like my example better, which is when you talk to a Marine Corps reservist, the Marine Corps reservist says, I'm a Marine. And I hear that and I think, oh, you were an active duty Marine. But he's a Marine Corps reservist, and it does matter to me, but they don't start out with that conversation, right? It doesn't say on the sticker on the back of his truck that he's a Marine Corps reservist. It says Marine Corps. The 7 tattoos he has on his arm don't say Marine Corps Reserves, they say Marines. Am I right or am I right?
And his email address also has it.
All right. But you have feelings, so that's good. Okay. So let's talk eligibility. So who is eligible? I'm not going to read through this. I'm going to summarize real quick. It's 181 days during peacetime, but we've been at war for 20-something years, so what's more applicable is the 90-day period of service. So what that means is you are full-time, activated, wearing the uniform every day for that period of time, and you've earned that benefit. But you got to be full-time, and training time doesn't count. So if you're in the National Guard or the reserves, and you went to training, and even if your training was a year long because you're an intel guy, and you're a linguist or something, 2 years of training, training time doesn't count. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does it now?
No.
Doesn't now. Okay. There's a circular we're going to talk about in a second that I'm going to let Brad do because he's better at it. Where it gets a little sticky or tricky is when you're dealing with National Guard guys that have been activated. So you meet a guy who's in the National Guard, and you happen to know that, but that's not the qualifying income you're using because he's, an engineer at Ford Motor Company, and you're like, oh, but he's in the Guard, and so you don't know you don't think active duty. But if he was deployed at any point, and if all you ask is have you always been in the National Guard, that's the wrong question. The right question is have you ever been activated? Because the moment that you're activated on certain types of orders, like for me, my experience is I was in the National Guard for 9 years. I was activated multiple times. So I went from being a M-Day soldier, which is the drilling status, the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, to active duty, quote unquote, for that year I was in Iraq and for that year I was in Afghanistan. So I no longer at that point am going to need to provide paperwork for a National Guard guy because now I'm an active duty veteran, right? My status changed. Even though I never left the National Guard, the orders changed the status. So we need to know what to look out for, what questions to ask, so we know the right paperwork. Are you with me? Okay. Cool. If you have any questions, shoot your hand up. Really?
Nope. No blank slide.
Is there minimum time in service, minimum time in service, or like for?
Yes, we're gonna get into that right now.
For what? Finish the thought, Marine.
I could read his thoughts.
Isn't there you might answer this, 30 consecutive days that also needs to be?
We're gonna talk about that.
The other thing I skipped over, which is a big one. So for the National Guard and the reserve components, those guys, if they never get moved into active duty and activated like I did, their requirement is 6 years in the reserves before they earn the benefit. So if you talk to a guy who's in the Michigan Army National Guard, for example, and his name tape says Army, so he's like, hey, I've been in the Army for 5 years. Okay, cool. That checks the box. No, it does not. You need to be in the reserves for 6 years before you've earned the benefit, unless you got activated. Yes?
Is there a spot for the Merchant Mariner of World War II? Did they, you know what I'm talking about?
Can I Google it?
Merchant Mariners of World War II.
Yeah,
It's all dead, but
I do not know the answer. I
There,
don't know
there
anything
is
about
something around that. Let's do some research on that. We'll get back to you.
okay, sounds good.
All right.
The question was, what about the veterans of the Merchant Mariners?
Of World War II.
Yeah.
Guys who moved all the oil and took the highest percentage of casualties in World War II.
It's a great question. I do not know the answer, but we can find out. That's what I like about, you know, what we do now. It's like, hey, I don't know the answer to everything, but I can find the answers to anything. I'll call the regional loan center. All right. The other people that would have entitlement, and you'd need to know the right paperwork to ask for, is when you're dealing with an unmarried surviving spouse. Has anyone dealt with an unmarried surviving spouse? Is there anything more impactful in your own personal life than helping that surviving spouse of a veteran who fell serving our country? What an honor. Just crazy. Okay. So, I'm going to let you talk a bit because I'm just rambling on.
All right. Now, what we're talking about is, you know, as Steve mentioned earlier today, the web LGY portal. Whenever you go in there to order the COE, if they're active duty, the likelihood of it being in there automatically is very high, right? I mean, I've never say never. I've yet to run into an active duty person that I've never crossed. I haven't been able to pull this, okay? But every single time that I do it for a reservist or National Guard, I have to prove that they met their time and service requirements, right? This is where we separate ourselves from everybody else, right? I can't tell you how many times I've helped a veteran, and I know he has too, that have been pre-approved by the top 5 online lenders, right? They're out house hunting for the last 2 months. Their agent finally convinces them to call us, right? Because their offers are getting overlooked. My very first call with the National Guard member, hey, how long have you been in the Guard? 14 months. Say what now? Right? 14 months and you have a pre-approval letter? Right? So if you're able to get this documentation and help them understand, like, you're falsely pre-approved, bro, I don't know how else to tell you this, and this sucks. It's a really crappy conversation, but if you can say this confidently, you're gonna win out every single time, okay? So some of the documents that you will need, if they're on active duty and they still are on active duty, a statement of service, and I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. Along with their current orders. Now, current orders typically is not for active duty, it is for the reserve component. Okay, and we'll also get into that in our next couple slides. If an active duty veteran has gotten out, it's a DD-214, which everybody should already know that. National Guard, NGB 22 or 23. I give the National Guard a lot of crap for a lot of things, but when it comes to documentation and paperwork, they have it together. One document to rule it all. All right, the reserve, statement of service and point statement, and unmarried surviving spouse needs to fill out 26-18-17. A lot of paperwork, huh? A lot of numbers. This is what a DD-214 looks like. Notice at the bottom here, member 4. See this? Everybody see that? Member copy 4. This is the only one that the VA allows. Sometimes they allow copy 2, but it depends on who you deal with, because I know I've submitted a full packet for a Marine Reserve who had honorable discharge documentation and his point statement. The VA denied it and told me I needed a DD-214 or statement of service. Like, what the hell? These two documents are completely different. What in the... So I had to call the VA, said, what is going on? Oh, it's our error, my bad. Here it is, approved. But can you imagine how many times a loan officers turn in the exact same packet, they get the denial letter back, and they say, oh crap, you're not eligible. Now what are they? They're unconventional. You could wait. No, I'm just kidding. No, what's up?
Well, tell us what is on a copy 4 that is not on a copy 2 that would make the difference.
You tell us, Darren. Teach the teacher.
Discharge, spin codes, and RE codes.
Yeah, that's the main thing. The character of discharge, this bottom section right here is what's on this one versus the others.
For re-enlistment eligibility and spin SPD, nobody can tell you what the hell that
No.
means.
So the main thing is it has a character, discharge, and re-enlistment stuff, and type of separation. Okay? That's a DD-214 member copy 4. How to obtain it? Pretty easy, I think, but not everybody else thinks it. You can apply for it through the, you can have them do it through millconnect.mil. I do have a how-to video on how to do this because I pulled my own. And I share this with every single client that I deal with because, believe it or not, every reservist that I speak with, they never gave me my packet when I got out. Bullshit. I know they did. You just put it somewhere else and you're too afraid to admit it. So I teach them how to go here and they pull their own documentation. Again, just establishing the fact that I am the authority, right? I'm helping them do it. Assist online. You go to archives.gov, which when we're filming this course, I made a how-to video on how to do this, and you can actually do this for your client through the archives online, and you get it back within 24 to 48 hours. Crazy. Or you can do it the old way, snail mail, mail or fax. You can mail documentation to the RLC in the archives, and they'll mail it back to you. All right? This is a statement of service. There is no documentation, official document that is a statement of service. It just has to have those things over there on the left. That's it. So you'll see one from the National Guard that'll say memorandum, and it'll be in a paragraph, and it won't be up and down like this. You're like, oh crap. As long as it has all of this stuff in there, you're good. Okay? Don't overthink it. It just needs to have this stuff in it. This one is just stacked. I don't know why that one's stacked versus the other ones, but that's exactly what you need on a statement of service.
What you'll find too with the National Guard units is if they were to, or if you, sometimes when you ask for that item, they'll come back and they're like, my admin guy does not know what a statement of service is, because their admin guy just got put in that position yesterday or whatever. Google it, and it's like in the top 5.
There's an example
You're gonna
right there.
see that one in the top 5.
And we
Just
have
send it
that
to
in the
them and
marketing
say, "Give us
material,
that."
VMA.
Yeah, it's in VMA's course, but you send them that. I've not had issues getting statement of service back, but you do sometimes have to explain it. Because I've had some pushback of like, we've never had to do that, and I'm like, yeah.
Lies, lies.
Yeah, you have. So where did we go into who, why, when, where, and why you need these? The statement of service? Who is the
Currently
statement
serving,
of service
the title
for?
of the slide.
Right?
They're still
Currently
serving.
So where this would really be a big deal is, I mean, obviously for active duty, but where you can win deals that maybe somebody else was about to deny is the National Guard. Because they get put on active duty and they're like, hey, cool. Here I am in Cuba for 9 months and I'm on orders and my wife's gonna buy a house because I'm on orders. And they call that one company, and that one company looks for the COE. Good on them. They started, and they say, you're not eligible. You don't have a certificate of eligibility. You're not there. I've seen that a bunch of times because they got the statement of service even maybe, but they didn't wait the right amount of days. So they needed to you got to have that 90-day window, right? So they tried immediately. I had 2 guys that were in Cuba on orders. They both applied for a loan because one of their buddies, I'm sure, said, you guys have the VA benefit now. And they're like, cool. And they're privates, and they don't know nothing. So they try and get a loan. And the lender that they called, they submitted the right paperwork. I'll give them credit where it's due. They submitted the right paperwork. But the paperwork shows that they didn't earn the benefit yet because the start time of their orders to where their statement of service is wasn't 90 days. So I talked to them, and I'm like, yeah, you're not eligible, but you will be in 3 weeks. So they waited 3 weeks, and we applied again. They both got certificates of eligibility. They both bought houses while they were deployed. There's opportunities there because lenders miss these little details, right? Like, that comes up. That's real world. Just wanted to throw that one out there. So, all right. Chapter 2. We're in chapters now. This is a book. Veterans Eligibility and Entitlement, Basic Eligibility Requirements. So, all right, so again, if you haven't been activated in the National Guard, you'll need to have completed 6 years of service. In 2000, there were a lot of people in the National Guard who had never deployed. 2005, there were not quite as many people that had been in the National Guard for 10 years with no deployments. By 2014, you had like no people in the National Guard that had been in for more than 2 years that hadn't deployed. So you're not gonna bump into that as much, the 6 year, that soldier who hasn't been in for 6 years or that airman in the Guard, but they do come up. Most of the time though, they're people like me where it's like, joined in end of 2006 and were shipped overseas by the end of 2007. That's most people. People don't understand about the National Guard. A lot of these guys can't hold down a good job because their op tempo is so high, so they just embrace it and they go, back-to-back deployments. My assistant team leader on my last deployment, it was his 3rd deployment in 4.5 years. Like, that's year-long deployments. So, yeah, that's National Guard op tempo can be pretty serious. they can't force you to go at that op-tempo, but the opportunity is there for sure. The applicant must have received an honorable character of discharge, same as active duty. Service in the individual, ready, reserve, or control group. Inactive status is not qualifying length of service for the home loan program. You got to be careful. So what we're looking for is that you've earned the points in the National Guard. So every time you drill, you acquire points. So you do your 1 weekend a month, you get a couple of retirement points. So when you get that NGB 23, the points statement, it's showing you your points that you've accrued for your retirement. You earn them by showing up to drill. They're not asking for a ton of points per year, but you got to meet them. So you got a lot of variety throughout the National Guard. Some National Guard units are pretty sloppy. They don't want to do paperwork. So when Joe Snuffy went AWOL for a year, they didn't actually kick him out like they were supposed to, and they welcomed him back like the prodigal son and let him get out at 6 years with an honorable discharge. But you get his point statement. He didn't earn his points. So you got to be careful and know what you're looking for on the point statement as well.
I can go over this one. I got this one. All right. So, as Eric just said, 6 creditable years. Well, what happens if they get out before the 6 years is up? Well, we got to ask the story. I mean, the VA home loan's a story loan, right? So you have to tell the story. Okay, well, tell me more about it. Give me more, right? There was a Marine that I helped. He served 3 years and 8 months, and he was so embarrassed that he did not complete the full term of his reserve obligation. His unit was getting activated to go to Iraq, and he was medically discharged because he had 3 herniated discs in his back, and he was a saw gunner, which is a heavy machine gun. So he can't carry the saw, he can't stay on duty, they kick him out. In 2015, he started the home loan process and was denied by the top 5 online call center idiots, okay? Fast forward to 2018, I connect with him because he's a photographer, and I'm like, hey man, what's your deal, right? So he starts telling me about it, and he also told me that his back issues were from his time in service. Well, are you receiving VA disability compensation? No, I don't even know who to talk to. So I connected him with a VSO. That VSO helped him apply for VA disability, which was denied at first, and he had to go for a higher level claim, all right? That was approved in June of 2021. From there, I applied for a COE. They denied it because he didn't meet the 6 full years, and he didn't have an honorable because it was other than honorable, or under honorable conditions. All right, so it wasn't honorable. So I'm like, crap, what the hell? Well, my question was, if he's eligible for one benefit, he should be eligible. He should get them all, right? So I fought it, and this is where the power of this group comes in, right? Because there's one lady, I'm not going to say her name, she's the queen of VA mortgages, right? I reached out to her and I was like, hey, is this true? If he's eligible for one, is it all of them? She's like, yeah, let me take a look. And this is when I found out the VA can actually reach over to the disability side and verify that, yes, it was because of his time in service, he was out. So I got the COE within 1 day. He is now a homeowner. He now follows me at every event that I host. He takes all the pictures, all the videos for free because he's like, I'm a homeowner now. He's engaged. His life is completely different than it was 5 years ago. Okay, so that's the power that we have. We can change lives just by knowing this stuff. Okay? What? Oh, VSO, Veteran Service Officer. They help vets with their benefits because we don't know our benefits, period. All right? So, yes. Correct. Yep. Same with active duty.
As long as the injury was related to.
Correct. That's the tricky part. You have to connect it back. Okay? So as long as if they are receiving VA disability compensation, that means something happened when they were serving that's affecting their life today. So if they're a reserve that does 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, it had to have happened on the drill weekend or their active training weeks, or when they were deployed, or whenever. Okay? There are 2 types of activation orders that you need to be concerned with the reserves and National Guard. First one is called Title 10 orders. This is where you get called to active duty by the President, Eric, got called to active duty by the president, and he was sent downrange. Downrange means overseas, to fight the good fight. All right? Does his thing, come back, honorably discharged. He now has a DD-214. He's considered to be active duty. Okay? The National Guard has one other activation order. It's called Title 32 orders. This is where you're called to active duty by the governor in which the state of the unit resides. Okay? And this was very prevalent during COVID. They're activated and sent all across the country to do mobile whatever, right? They're also activated and sent to Washington, D.C. for the riots. Okay? And why is that important? Because now the VA has passed this new Health Care and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020. This expanded the eligibility to National Guard members. Okay? So as long as they're activated on Title 32 orders for 30 consecutive days, and they have 90 accumulative service days, including drill weekends, and all the other 501, 502, 503, 504, 505 Title 32 orders. Believe it or not, civilian gun range control is one of the activation orders, which is I found to be really weird, and I'm like, why doesn't anybody else volunteer for that? But they expanded this. So once they have, it gets a little tricky when you're doing this. I've submitted 5 of these to the VA. You have to follow up and call because it's a higher level a review of all the paperwork. So you need activation orders, statement of service, because the point statement. The point statement shows their drill weekends. That shows their 2 weeks of active duty training. So you need the orders, statement of service. If they're done, DD-214, point statement, you got it. Okay? So let's go back to these. These are the documents for the other branches. Their reserve point statement. I would highly encourage you to know these because they don't know them, number one. But if you ask a Marine for their NGB 22 form, they'd be like, what the hell is that? If you ask them for the CRCR, he's gonna go, what the hell is that? You ask them for the point statement, what the hell is that? Just get me in touch with your admin, please. Okay? I can talk with them and we can get to the bottom of it. But they don't know this stuff. If you know this stuff, you're building yourself as the authority every single time. So if you get all this documentation right, submit it to the VA, they're going to think you're a god because very few other loan officers know this stuff. Okay? Your turn.
Pop quiz. Do you get a DD-214 from someone on active duty? No. Presumably no, right? You could have got out and got back in, but presumably no. Do you get a DD-214 from a guy who's in the National Guard?
No. Depends. You got to ask for the right DD-214.
Yeah. In this era, guy's been in for a few years? Probably asking for a DD-214. However, do you want to ask for a DD-214 without asking the question that confirms you need a DD-214 and that he earned it? No, because then you look stupid. You look like you don't know what you're talking about, right? So it's important for us to understand where these documents come from, when they're generated, so you're not asking veterans for things that they don't have and making them feel silly and making yourself look silly. So that would be something that I would highly recommend, to have a cheat sheet. Okay, I'm sure we have one. Yeah, all right, so we already covered that. If we don't have one already uploaded, I mean, we should have a cheat sheet. We should have a cheat sheet that people can put their face on and send to their realtors. Not that I want their realtors to know it, but I want them to know that you guys know it.
Got a fun evening ahead of them tonight.
Huh? No. Okay. So documents for the National Guard. If you're still serving, you need the NGB 23. That again is the point statement. If you're on orders, and you're like my Cuba guys, I needed to get their activation orders because I needed to see the start time of when I could start counting those days, right? Then I needed the statement of service to show that it's today and they're still there, right? And they didn't go AWOL. That's important. So then I submit that to the VA, right? Absent without leave is AWOL. Sorry. DD-214 needed after the activation period, right? So come home from a deployment, you get your DD-214. So can you have more than one DD-214?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Every
I got
reservist
a
that you
bunch
come
of them.
across will have multiple DD-214s. You need to figure out which one is applicable and which one's not. Because they will get one from boot camp. They'll get one from their job school. They'll get one from combat training. They'll get one from their 2 weeks active duty. They have a ton of DD-214s. Which one matters, which one doesn't?
I will add a caveat of, so on that DD-214, there's a 2-year mark that you need to hit. So if you, in order to earn the benefit, you need, during wartime, again, how many days? 90 days. So you earn the benefit at 90 days, and then you get drug tested, and then you get sent home. Wah, wah.
Damn marijuana.
Tell you what. So at that point, do you still have the benefit? No. You don't, right? Let's say you are in for 90 days and you earn your benefit. You're sweet, I can get my COE. But then the needs of the Army say, we don't need you. You're going home. Do you still have the benefit?
Yes.
Yes. What if the Army says, we don't really need you. Would you like to go home? And you opt to go home. You lose your benefit. See the little nuance there? I mean, those are real close, right? Like, either way, the Army didn't need you. So, but you know, the choice, I've seen that come up. I've seen both of those scenarios come up. And why it's important to know that and to have that kind of scenario stick in your mind is because when that guy calls you, you could be in the position I was in, which was lender A said he doesn't have the benefit. They submitted for a COE, and the VA turned him down. Said, you don't have the time. And I called the VA. I submitted a document, and the lady's like, I actually can't believe this. I have so many good things to say about the VA, but this employee, I'm like, get a new job. Because she told me, well, you know, there's a whole bunch of other loan types. And I'm like, woman? I was furious. This was years ago. I'm assuming she didn't last long in that position. So I talked to somebody else. I hung up with her, and then I called again, and I spoke to somebody else, and they were like, let me look at these designations on it. And it turned out it was needs of the Army, and he did have the benefit. So all of a sudden, he was getting a VA loan in his home purchase and not that rural development loan. What? What?
What if you're under 2 years but you get medically discharged?
I'll address that right now. All right. So I had a Coast Guard guy, I call him a Coastie, so that's what I'm going to say from now on. I had a Coastie reach out to me. He's like, I was denied my COE. It's like, what's going on? He's like, what?
I didn't finish my slide.
Oh, he just asked questions, so I'm answering it.
Well, you're moving on to
what?
a whole new topic.
So he reached out to me and he says,
We'll cover it in a minute, Nathan.
he says, I was denied. Yeah. I was denied a COE. And I was like, okay, for what? And he's like, I didn't serve long enough. So along the lines of the 2-year activation or the 2-year requirement, I was like, okay, when did you get out? And he's like, or how long did you serve? He said 1 year, 11 months, and 28 days. And I was like, holy, are you serious right now? And he's like, yeah. He had to have served 2 full years on active duty. Their command kicked him out 2 days before he hit his 2-year mark. So he's not eligible for the VA home loan. So 2 years is a requirement unless discharged for a service-connected disability. I have helped a Marine who went through boot camp, SOI, which is School of Infantry, and it looked like he was power bombed. Like he was mouthing off, somebody picked him up and dropped him on his head because he had scars all over the back of his shoulders. He was in for 8 months. He's eligible for the VA home loan. 100% disabled, exempt from property taxes. He's a homeowner now. All right, so if you know these things, this is what makes us better. Okay? Go ahead.
It's a pretty good indicator if somebody's got a disability rating. I have been told that there are scenarios where you could have a disability rating and not have the benefit. I do not know what that scenario would be. So from what I've seen, it's pretty much a guarantee. Do you? What is that unicorn I've never seen?
Basically, the DD-214 got coded wrong. So you gotta go back.
Unfixable. Okay. Do you remember when I had that guy he's like, I bought a home on a VA loan, and then, you know, the Army said they didn't need me anymore in like 96, and he couldn't buy another house? That was crazy. That was the first time I'd seen that. Yes, sir.
I had one, she came to me, she had a denied it. And I have a personal relationship with the loan production officer, and I called him and I said, what's up with this? He said, she only served 80-some days.
Ah, so she never earned it.
And he said, not enough time served.
Never actually earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He said,
That,
we recognize she's got the disability and
right.
she's getting paid.
Yeah, if you get your leg busted in basic training, you didn't earn the benefit.
Yeah.
Right, and you can get paid, so that makes sense. That's a rarity.
First time that's ever happened.
Awesome point, thank you. Okay, another one that comes up a lot too, pregnancy. Women get out because they're pregnant. I've had this happen where, you know, I had a lender call me and said, Eric, I've heard you're the VA guy. This is a manual underwrite. They're already under contract. Can you just take it? And I'm like, cool. It wasn't cool, because as soon as I got the opportunity to talk to the veteran, and then she explained, like, oh yeah, I was in from here to here. I'm like, you ever deploy? She's like, no. How long were you in? Why'd you get out? I don't think you have the benefit. But she also didn't have her paperwork. So that was a real mess. She closed FHA, and that was a real bummer. She was set up to fail. At least she could close FHA, right? Because sometimes you don't have the funds to close FHA. You're not in an area that can go RD, or you don't qualify in any other loan program than the flexible program of the VA, and then you get put under contract by some Yahoo who doesn't know what they're doing, and you spend a bunch of money and waste a bunch of time. And that's sad. So it's important that we know the right questions to ask. This is an NGB 22. That's once a National Guard member is discharged. I have an NGB 22 somewhere. I have no idea. But it's not relevant to me because I have multiple DD-214s from time on active duty. Okay? But if I was 6 years and out with no deployments, because I served from, you know, peacetime, 93 to 99, then chances are you're going to need this. Okay? NGB form 23, that's the point statement. Okay? Showing all of the points. Statement of service must accompany this document. That would be if they're still in, right?